So let's begin by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. For this course, I'm going to use Xcode version 16. My guess is that any version after this would also work for the course. The later versions of Xcode 15 probably work as well, but I would go with 16 just to be safe, 16 or higher. When you create a new project inside Xcode 16, it's going to ask you what kind of project to make. Let's make an app, of course. And let's go ahead and name our project. I'm going to call this AI Chat Course. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Add in your team here. There is going to be some features later in the course where you're going to need an Apple developer account. That is through Apple. It costs $100 a year to have an official developer account. If you don't do that, you can still follow 99% of this course. All right, the organization identifier, I'm going to do the classic com dot, then my team name, and then dot the name of this course. This is just the typical structure that we use for bundle IDs. And we are going to use the new testing system, which is called Swift Testing. So if you want to use the old testing system before Xcode 16, it was called XC Test for unit and UI tests. Now we have Swift Testing. We're not going to write tests for a while in this course, but we will write a ton of them towards the end of the course. For now, let's just include Swift Testing just because it's here already. And storage, we're going to put none. Storage is just for local storage for your app if you want to use Swift data or core data. We are going to build our app being dependency agnostic, meaning that later in this course, we can determine whether we want to use core data or Realm or a remote database. And we're going to actually use Firebase later in the course, as well as the file manager as a local database. We're not going to use core data or Swift data in this app. Although when we get to that area, I will talk about how we could implement either or both of these in the app. Again, we're going to build the app essentially dependency agnostic so that our app is not coupled to any specific dependency or any specific storage. All right, AI Chat Course, go ahead and click Next, save it where you need to save it on your computer, and let's get coding. All right, I'm going to make this full screen. I'm going to switch the preview down to an iPhone 16, and let's get that preview working as well. Just a couple things before we get started. I do want to point out that we are going to use Swift 6. So if you go into the Project Navigator and you go to Build Settings and you type in Swift Language, you can find the Swift language version here. So this is basically the version of the Swift language that the compiler is going to check against. And Swift 6 is significantly more constrictive than Swift 5. It's harder to build on Swift 6, but it is safer and ultimately better to build on Swift 6. So now that we have it, let's make sure our project is compiling for Swift 6. If you want to stick with Swift 5, you're more than welcome to. You'd basically just have less places where the compiler yells at you for errors and warnings. But because we're building a brand new app, let's build it as best as we can and go with Swift 6. All right, while we're in the Project Navigator here, I'm going to go to the General tab, and we're going to build our app for iOS only. So I'm going to remove macOS and visionOS. That's just going to overcomplicate our app. I will talk later in the course about supporting those platforms. We are going to actually add a Mac Catalyst app, which basically lets us run our iOS iPad app on a Mac. Let's go ahead and enable this. So we still will be able to run our app on a Mac just through the iPad app, essentially. The end product is very modular. So if you want to go ahead and support Vision OS, you definitely can, or even another platform like watchOS. But I'm not going to do that. As it stands today, Vision OS is a significantly smaller market than iOS, and I want this course to be focused on the bread and butter, what most apps are going to be building for, which is just native iOS SDKs. iPhone, iPad, and Mac. Let's look at the minimum deployment real quick. So building a new app, it's giving us the iOS 18. If I was actually building a brand new app, I probably would keep it as iOS 18 just so that I could use some of the really new SwiftUI view modifiers. But we're not doing any of that fancy stuff in this app. So we're going to actually support iOS 17 and above in this app. So let's go ahead and change this to 17. We'll change the release version to 17 as well. A lot of the code can be used in versions below 17, but I don't want to go too far below because I do want to use some of the new SwiftUI stuff like the observable macros and things like that. So let's keep 17. That looks good. And the rest of this we can leave for now. Before we actually go and start adding anything to our project, let's make sure that we have our remote repo set up on GitHub. So I'm going to click on the source control navigator over here in the top left. I'm going to go to the repository section, click the down arrow here, and let's look for a remote repo. Obviously we don't have one yet. Let's create a new remote repo. So if you have your GitHub connected to Xcode, you should be able to push directly to your GitHub here. I'm going to keep the repository name the same as the course, and I'm actually going to make this private because it is obviously a paid course. So you will not find this publicly on my GitHub, but as we'll talk about later, I have a lot of reusable frameworks on the GitHub that you guys are welcome to use. Let's go ahead and click create. I should be able to see our main branch here created on GitHub. Let's click on changes. It looks like I have a couple uncommitted changes. This is some of the changes that we made to our project here. Let's go ahead and commit those. Let's call this a feature and call this update project settings. Let's stage and commit. While we're here, let's also just push it up to GitHub. I think this is a good point where you should probably go and check your GitHub and just make sure that it did successfully push. I can see the initial commit as well as the most recent commit that we just pushed here. Cool. Before we wrap up this video, we're going to add a couple custom assets, a custom color, as well as the launch screen, because this is going to be a very long course and we're going to be building our app thousands of times. And I'd rather just see the nice launch screen for the next 1,000 builds. So let's go to the assets folder and click on the app icon. I'm going to click and drag the app icon onto my project here. I'm going to include this image in the downloadable files in this lesson in this course. So you should be able to download this image. It is 1024 by 1024. And the cool thing about the new Xcode projects is that if I just put this one image in, it will support all of the sizes. So I don't have to actually go and resize this image 100 times for all of these sizes anymore, which is awesome. While we're doing this, I'm also going to drag it a second time into my app project just as an image. And I'll call this second one just an app icon internal. I do this in my projects because it's sort of flaky sometimes. If you try to reference the actual app icon from your app code, it usually doesn't work or it doesn't load in like some of the SwiftUI previews. So I'll usually just copy and have a second version that is actually just an image. It's not an app icon, even though it's the same image. This way I can just use this when I reference it in my code base and not from the actual app icon. We're only gonna have one size of this, so let's go ahead and make this a single scale. And while we're here, let's add the accent color to our project. So let's click on accent color, click on the little color tab here, open up the inspector, and then let's go to the color down here. Let's go ahead and change this to sRGB, red, green, blue, and then we'll change the floating point to the 8-bit hexadecimal so that we can type in a hex number here. And the accent color that I'm going to use for this course is going to be FF5757. And let's make that 100% opacity. Should look like this. I'm going to use the same accent color for both light and dark mode. If you want to have different accent colors, again, you can always just change the appearance to have any and a light version so that the dark mode accent color could be slightly different. We're going to have the same color, so let's just keep that as none, and that looks good for now. Let's build out our launch screen really quickly. Let's right-click the navigator here and create a new group, a new folder, sorry. That folder will be called core. This is where all the core screens in our app are going to go. Inside the core folder, I'm going to create a root folder. This is where the root screens will go. One of those root screens is going to be our launch screen. So let's create a new file from template. I'm going to create a launch screen here. So let's click on launch screen, click next, and I'm going to call this launch screen with no space in the name here and click create. Yes, I am using the storyboard launch screen and not the info.plist launch screen. Even though we don't really use storyboards anymore, I find this much easier to work with if I really want to customize the launch screen. All right, first thing, let's delete this label. Let's click on the background and make it our accent color. So I'll click on color here, move up to the top, and we should have our accent color that we just added as well. All right, in the center, we're going to put our app icon. So let's click the plus here and go to image. We'll just click and drag an image view into the center of this screen. I'm going to click on it and let's add some constraints to the edge of the device here. So down here at the bottom right, I'm going to click on the Add New Constraints icon, and let's make it maybe 24 from the left as well as 24 from the right. And I'm going to give it a height of about 300 pixels here. Let's click Add 3 Constraints. Let's also click on the Align button here in the bottom, and let's align this both horizontally and vertically to the container so it's right in the center. Cool. Let's click the image icon here, and we should have our app icon internal. Notice how the actual app icon version is not here, but only the internal version is what we see. That's why we added the 2 images. So I'll put the internal version here. That looks good. And let's keep this aspect fit, which I think is the right choice for the image sizing. Before we leave, let's add a label. I'll click the plus. Let's add label. Click and drag it onto here. This label will just say AI Chat, will be the name of our app. Very basic, I know. I'm going to hold the control button and click and drag from the label to the asset here. And this will then ask me what kind of constraint I want to add between these two. I will add a constraint. Let's go vertical spacing between these two. And when I click on the constraints button in the top right here, the size inspector, I can now see that that constraint is set to, I guess, 0. And I think 0 is what I want it to actually be. So let's make that to 0. I'm going to click off it, and I'm going to click on this label again. Let's click on our alignment button at the bottom, and let's make this horizontal in the container so that it's right in the center of the screen. And let's lastly change the actual UI of the label. Let's make it a white text, and let's give it, click the text, let's click the font button here and make it maybe a large title, AI Chat. And it looks like we have our launch screen ready to go. Lastly, let's make sure the project knows that this is our launch screen. So in previous versions of Xcode, we would go to the navigator and we would go and we would click down here, the launch screen file, and we would put that as our launch screen.storyboard. If I go and I click off of this and I click back, I will notice that the launch screen file disappears. This is sort of a bug in Xcode and sort of by design. Unfortunately, this is super confusing and it actually took me a long time to figure out. So we're actually not going to use this anymore, and we're going to set these values directly in our info.plist. So let's come up here and click on the info.plist. In our project, we are going to click, let's click at the bottom here, we'll click plus. We're going to start typing launch screen, and if we were using the SwiftUI launch screen from info.plist where we don't use a storyboard, then we would use this launch screen setting. But because we're using the storyboard, we want to reference a file name specifically, so we'll click this second one. And we'll just change our file name to launch screen, which is the exact same as the name of our file here. All right, I'm going to Command-Shift-K to clean, and let's click the play button or the run button to build it to a simulator, and let's see if it worked. All right, so when it builds, we can see the app icon is intact. Let's actually change the display name quickly. So if I come back into our project here, let's go to the target, the general tab. The display name is just going to be AI Chat. We don't need the word course there. Build it one more time. We should see it says AI Chat. And let me restart that one more time. It says AI Chat now as the display name. Our launch screen is working. Our launch screen, the app loads so fast, but the launch screen is there. And then we have our tint color working, our accent color. We can see that the icon has changed to our accent color. It looks like our project is set up and we are ready to rock and roll. Before we end the video, let's just commit this. So I'm going to Option Command C. I can also just integrate and click commit. This will bring up all of our changes, and we're going to just stage everything that we've changed. Let's put this feature and we'll say add app icon, launch screen, and let's go ahead and commit that and push that up to GitHub as well. All right, that's it for this video. We did a lot of setup, and I will see you guys in the next video.